Part 6. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 51. Hearing the word witch hunter, Rudolph was stunned. He closed his eyes slightly to cover his shrunken pupils. At this moment, he repeatedly thought about his current situation. He didn't know if he was exposed. Although Rudolph is only a level 1 wizard now, the level of the two wizards is very high. According to the description of the star map, level 3 wizards cannot be easily discovered unless they are related to level 4 apostles. Level 3 zombie teeth can only be seen at first glance by level 4 wizards and level 4 zombies. Level 1 pet crystal, because the main material is level 3 wizard crystal, it also requires level 4 wizards and level 4 druids to instantly see through. At least the Black Gold Guide, the Libra wizard, didn't see it. If she saw it, with her seemingly old but domineering behavior, she would definitely give Rudolph an unforgettable lesson. As long as Rudolph is careful and doesn't easily infuse star power into these two wizards, he will be the same as an ordinary person. After Rudolph figured it out, he said with courage, "Hello, two witch hunters." Rudolph then noticed what the two were wearing. One was tall, the other was thin and white, both wearing black windbreaker suits. The sun shone in from the window and shone on the backs of the two, which made their expressions hidden in the shadows. The tall witch hunter spoke first. "Patrolman Rudolph, I am the witch hunter Ichabod. We are investigating the murder of Sheriff Zaputy. Please relax, this is not an interrogation, just some collection of Sheriff Zaputy's experience before his death. Now, please answer the questions of the witch hunter Kevin." The witch hunter was very serious and gave Rudolph a strong sense of oppression, but the man named Ichabod gave the initiative of the conversation to the witch hunter named Kevin next to him. "Hello, Patrolman Rudolph," the thin and white witch hunter said, "my name is Kevin. Judging from the voice, Kevin is very young. Patrolman Rudolph, the night before Sheriff Zaputy was killed, he was in charge of the outer defense circle during a raid on the Black Gold office. According to the police, you returned with Sheriff Zaputy, and all of the sheriff's subordinates were killed." Rudolph nodded. "Yes. I came to Fabro City for the first time a few days ago to submit a report on the werewolf riot in Lehmantown. Since it was my first time here, I was curious about everything and wandered around Fabro City. Just as I was about to go back to the hotel, I heard a certain party. It was getting noisy, so I went to take a look. In an alley, I met Sheriff Zaputy leading his men to hunt down a woman in black." "Woman in black? What kind of woman in black?" "A woman with black beetle patterns on her face. I saw them fighting, and without thinking, I joined Sheriff Zaputy's side." "Can you describe the fight in detail?" Rudolph started from hiding on the balcony, the beetle of the Black Queen, the guide who took the handling fee, the purple mist, etc., and told them all. "In other words, a wizard appeared at that time and called the woman the Black Queen." "Yes. After the wizard took the handling fee, he ignored us and left." Ichabod and Kevin looked at each other, and Kevin continued. "Then you are really lucky. The wizard is a class A wanted criminal of the Judgment Bureau, codenamed Black Gold Guide. If she had taken action, you would have died that night. The witch hunters prepared a very powerful force to deal with the wizard, but we didn't find her. Unexpectedly, she went outside to find someone to ask for the handling fee." Rudolph agreed very much about the power of the Black Gold Guide. An old lady like the Black Gold Guide lived a long time, which means that she collected a large number of magic weapons, which were enough to make her an A-level wanted criminal, and she could still be an A-level wanted criminal. "Let's go back to the Black Queen." Ichabod stopped discussing the Black Gold Guide, as if the existence of the Black Gold Guide was not very glorious for the Trial Bureau. "You said that the Black Queen's ability is to control a lot of beetles." "Yes, those beetles are highly poisonous. Many patrolmen collapse to the ground after being bitten by beetles, and the same is true for Sheriff Zaputy. After being poisoned, he lost a large part of his combat effectiveness." Rudolph continued, I was not bitten by the beetles because I was hiding on the balcony. The evil god's nest, the priest of the evil god's nest. Ichabod was thoughtful and guessed about the ability of the Black Queen. Rudolph hurried back. Yes, Sheriff Zoputy said so too. Did you leave any of Black Queen's things, clothes, hair, or anything else when you were fighting? Hearing Kevin's question, Rudolph kept thinking, and he suddenly remembered something. Blood, I don't know if it was me or Sheriff Zoputy who shot Black Queen in the chaos. She left blood on the ground, but I don't know if the sanitation workers cleaned it up. Blood, Kevin glanced at Ichabod. If there is blood, the difficulty of the pursuit will drop sharply. Ichabod immediately stood up and said, I will contact the patrol officers who are handling the scene to see if they have collected the blood at the scene. Ichabod left the meeting room, leaving only Rudolph and Kevin. The atmosphere became very relaxed and no longer related to the case. Kevin stretched out his hand. Kevin, a witch hunter who dreams of becoming a witch examiner. Rudolph also stretched out his hand and shook hands with Kevin. At the moment of shaking hands, Rudolph was nervous, but he overcame his nervousness and asked as if nothing had happened, witch hunters and witch examiners, are there big differences between the two? Of course there are big differences. Witch examiners can sit in the office and only need to do some inspection and judgment work, while witch hunters have to go out on the field. Rudolph didn't know what to say. It seems that no matter where you are, there are more people who want to sit in the office than those who want to go out on the field. I prefer to go out on the field. It would be boring for me to stay in the police station all the time. I'm different. I'm too lazy. I still like to do nothing and be late and leave early every day. Ignoring Kevin's complaints about work, he suddenly thought of something. Kevin's dream is to become a witch examiner, so he must know something about witch examiners. Maybe Rudolph can learn about the methods of witch hunters from Kevin. After all, the two witch hunters have no doubts about Rudolph now. Rudolph is in the dark and they are in the light. Soon, Ichabod came back. The patrolman didn't notice the bloodstains left by the Black Queen. Sheriff Zoputy died that night, and this patrolman Rudolph was from another place, so no one dealt with this important piece of evidence. Let's go to the scene. Ichabod and Kevin both looked at Rudolph, and Rudolph stood up reluctantly. It seemed that he had to go too. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 52. Rudolph didn't expect that he would come to this place again so soon. It was daytime, and there were pedestrians coming and going around. Kevin was carefully picking up the dirt in the cracks of the bricks on the ground. The sanitation workers in Fabreau City were so diligent that they had already dealt with most of the blood on the ground. Only a little abnormal black and red could be seen in the cracks of the bricks. Kevin was concentrating on his work. Ichabod paid attention to the surrounding situation from time to time, and only Rudolph was absent-minded. He looked at the alley where Hajin led the passers-by out. It was the gap between the gables of the two buildings, and there was a side door of the house inside. Some people went in and out of the side door. I don't know what these two buildings are used for. Rudolph was very afraid that someone would come out of this alley again, and he was also afraid that the Queen of Darkness was still staring at this place. After cleaning enough black and red dirt from 3 cracks of the bricks, Kevin carefully put the dirt in a transparent plastic bag. Okay, that's about it. If we're lucky, we'll be able to identify the murderer soon. Let's go and wait for the night to come. After saying that, the two witch hunters were ready to leave. Excuse me, can I go now? Rudolph wanted to go back to the police station. Ichabod said, Patrolman Rudolph, are you seeking support for your Lehman Police Department? Because of the werewolf riot? Yes. What a coincidence, we are the two sent to support Lehman. It's just that we are now entangled in the case of Sheriff Zoputy. After this is resolved, we will go to Lehman with you. Rudolph was a little reluctant to believe, that is to say. Ichabod said. Let's go together. The sooner this is over, the sooner you can get help. You should stay with us. I will ask you about Lehman in detail. Didn't the city police station send support? Does the tribunal need to be directly involved? The tribunal was originally an institution separated from the police station, and the distinction between the two is not so obvious. The police station will apply for the tribunal to participate when there is something, and the tribunal will also apply for the police station to act together when there is something. Especially since a knight died in your place, the Baron asked the tribunal to get involved as well. Rudolph will be safer away from witch hunters. Following the witch hunter, Rudolph can understand the witch hunter's methods. But it's all right. The three of them came to the suburbs and walked a long way before they found the top of a barren mountain. Ichabod asked Kevin, "Are you satisfied here?" Kevin looked up at the sky. "Very good, there is no obstruction, and there will be no light pollution at night like in the city." Rudolph also looked up at the sky. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the brightest stars could be seen at this time. Rudolph was a little confused. What was Kevin looking at the sky for? After simply eating some dry food, the three waited for the night to fall. Kevin lay on the grass and looked at the starry sky. Rudolph also followed Kevin's example and lay on the grass. This is the uncomfortable part of being out on duty. Rudolph was a little hungry after eating a little at night. Ichabod patrolled from a distance from time to time, as if guarding Kevin. Kevin didn't know what identity it was to let a level 2 alchemist like Ichabod come as a guard. "Rudolph, I'm free anyway, let me do a divination for you." "Divination? What divination?" "Well, birth chart divination," Kevin said. "Tell me your birthday, I will draw a birth chart for you, which is the star map when you were born, with the constellations and planetary positions of that night marked on it." Hearing the word star map, Rudolph's heart suddenly tightened. This may not be possible. Rudolph said, "I am an orphan, I don't have a file, I grew up eating hundreds of families in Lehman Town, and I don't know when I was born." Kevin turned his head in surprise. "Sorry, I mentioned your sad story. You don't have to be so polite, you are a witch hunter who can scare children to tears." "And this is not a sad story." After thinking for a while, Kevin said, "Is this the case? When I become a level 3 apostle, I can do fog divination, and then I can know your birthday." Rudolph said in his heart, "By then, I have to stay away from you. Are you an alchemist?" The more I listen, the more confused I am. This doesn't seem like the ability of an alchemist. My sheriff doesn't have these abilities. Kevin pointed to the crystal ball he had just taken out and said, "I am a word spirit." Rudolph glanced at Ichabod the first time, and Kevin saw this action. "Don't be nervous. As you said, alchemists have monotonous abilities and can't handle all problems. They also need some helpers. So, Ichabod won't rush over and blow my head off." Rudolph had only seen the word spirit in Sir Jennifer's study. The book briefly described it as being good at prophecy and curses. But the word spirit is a heretic apostle. Kevin was still talking to himself. "When I become a level 3 word spirit, I can do fog divination. When the time comes, you give me your blood, and I can know some of your past events. I should be able to divination who your parents are. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. The only problem is that it's too long ago, so it may take a lot of blood, about 800 cubic centimeters. After listening to you, I don't want to think about it anymore." "Don't you want to know who your parents are?" "I really don't want to." Rudolph shook his head. As a time traveler, he knew who the parents of this body were and what they did. Being an orphan was good. If he wanted, he could run away at any time. At most, he could take Yvonne with him and run away. How good would that be? "Okay, you are so cool that you don't even think about it. But, can you make a false prophecy for me? You predict that my sheriff, Sheriff Claude, is my father. I think his inheritance is quite rich and he has no children yet. Does your sheriff know that you think so? I think he would like to have an heir like me for free. How old is your sheriff? More than 30, maybe 35 or 36. Then how could he have a son as old as you? Would he believe it? I think you are only 17 or 18 years old. I am 17 and he is 35. Is there any problem with that? Don't worry about age. I never said anything when the sheriff had his first time. He won't have any doubts about it. He will even feel proud of his bravery when he was young. Kevin scratched his head, unable to keep up with Rudolph's train of thought. At this time, Ichabod suddenly called Rudolph in the distance. "Patrolman Rudolph, please come here." Kevin said, "You have to go, Rudolph, I can't be disturbed when I'm doing divination." Rudolph got up from the grass, he looked at the starry sky and found that the moon was at its highest point. Rudolph quickly walked towards Ichabod. "Patrolman Rudolph, Kevin is going to do a certificate divination. In a while, we will patrol within 100 meters around Kevin. I'll be here, you'll be there. Don't let anyone or any animal disturb Kevin." Rudolph nodded. He came to the other end of the dirt hill and waited. When the moon reached the highest point of the starry sky, the star map suddenly sent a message, and the star power was changing. The star power was gathering above Kevin's head. Could it be that the word spirit was also an apostle who used the star power? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 53. Kevin took out a fist-sized crystal ball. The crystal ball was shining with blue-white light. This light was so weird in the night. The blood-soaked mud, as well as Sheriff Zoputi's gun, slowly floated and slowly rotated around the crystal ball that was also in the air. The crystal ball emits a blue-white light, which shines on the mud and the gun. After a while, the muzzle of the gun stopped swinging erratically, and instead turned towards the mud soaked in the blood of the Black Queen. This proves that the last person the gun is aimed at is the Black Queen. There were dense beads of sweat on Kevin's forehead. The gun slowly fell to the ground, leaving only mud floating in the air, slowly sinking. The sludge slowly turned into a linear shape and began to rotate around the crystal ball. After a while, maybe a few seconds, maybe more than 10 seconds, the soil turned into a spindle shape, pointing in one direction. Kevin closed his eyes, the light on the crystal ball disappeared, and the dirt fell to the ground. Rudolph saw Ichabod walking towards Kevin across from him, and Rudolph hurriedly walked towards Kevin. "Kevin, how's it going?" At this time, Kevin closed his eyes and did not open them. He seemed very tired. "Ichabod, according to the divination results, Sheriff Zoputi's gun will eventually be aimed at the owner of these sludges. I did a divination on the mud again and found that the person who killed Sheriff Zoputi was indeed the priest of the evil god's insect hive. The Black Queen is in the southwest, not far away, half a day's journey." Ichabod nodded. "Okay, take a rest." Kevin stretched out his hands and lay there, unable to open his eyes. The divination just now consumed a lot of his strength. After listening to the conversation between the two, Rudolph realized that the witch hunter did not need those troublesome evidence deductions to solve the case. He only needed to let the spirit perform divination. Ichabod seemed not to be sleepy, so Rudolph asked in a low voice. "Mr. Ichabod, I have only been a patrolman for a few months and I have a question for you. Please tell me. I don't have a problem with Kevin, I just want to ask, isn't Yan Ling a heretic apostle?" Ichabod glanced at Kevin. Yan Ling is indeed a heretic apostle, but without using cursed Yan Ling, their divination ability is very practical. Ever since the royal family hired a royal astrologer, the suppression of Yan Ling began to diverge. Nowadays, Cursed word spirits are only regarded as heretical apostles, while divination word spirits have become our excellent helpers. Whether it is the royal family, nobles, or parliament, they all need the ability to speak the spirit. They can make many complex things simple, eliminating complicated processes and getting the correct answers directly. Divination books issued by Yanling are as valid as evidence. Oh, then the royal family and parliament are really good at adapting. Rudolf also felt that if the tribunal were all alchemists, it would be difficult to deal with so many weird apostles. Perhaps, there are many whitewashed heretics in the tribunal. The next day, following the direction Kevin pointed, the three of them came to the far side of a rural church. Rudolf asked Kevin if the murderer was inside, but Kevin said he wasn't sure. What? In other words, divination only works at night. If things change during the day, the divination will be invalid. For half a day, I didn't know what happened. Moreover, I couldn't see the stars during the day, and I couldn't make divination. Rudolf breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He thought about it. If he was targeted by the spirit, it would be very difficult. As long as the word spirit is not omniscient and omnipotent, at least there is no threat to the word spirit during the day. Rudolf decided that he would never litter in the future, and anything related to him would be kept well and no one would be able to get it. If the Yanling gets his things and performs divination on him, wouldn't all his secrets be exposed? The murderer of Chief Zoputi was probably in that church. The question now is how to proceed. Ichabod asked, "What is that church dedicated to?" Rudolf looked at the decoration outside the church and returned. Generally, village churches worship the Druid goddess of nature. Farmers believe that the goddess of nature can protect livestock and crops, which is what Druids have always preached. Judging from the decoration outside the church is carved with flowers, grass, cattle, and sheep. It is definitely the church of the goddess of nature. The Black Queen is actually hiding in the church of the goddess of nature, and is very good at finding places. If a word spirit hadn't happened to get her blood sample, the Black Queen might not have been discovered for a long time. Generally, with a large farmer as the core, a village will naturally appear. A farmer who works for a farmer will place his home around the farmer. If the village had been around for a long time, the Druids would have built a village church here. At this time, there were ordinary farmers and women coming in and out. The church was not only a place for prayer, but also one of the few places in the village for communication and conversation. Ichabod looked at the farmers and peasant women who were constantly coming in and out, and said, wait until there are no ordinary people in the church at night, wait until Kevin does another horoscope, and then we will attack again. The murderer couldn't escape, her blood was in Kevin's hands. Ichabod and Kevin were very confident that after many such pursuits, no one could escape them. At night, when the moon reached its highest point, Kevin did another divination. The result is the same. The murderer is still in the church and has not left the church. Action. When they approached the church, Rudolf couldn't help asking, "How can we sneak into the small church?" Before Ichabod answered, Kevin spoke first, "Sneak in? No need to sneak in, just rush in." Before Rudolf could react, he saw Ichabod whipping his horse and speeding towards the church. Kevin also slapped his horse to catch up, and Rudolf had to urge the horse. Rudolf carefully pulled out his gun, not knowing how to cooperate with the two men. Kevin said to Rudolf while riding his horse, "Don't be nervous, Rudolf, since we are with you, we can guarantee your safety. You don't even need to do anything. Ichabod can solve it alone. But we'd better stay away from Ichabod. He is more irritable and can easily crush us." At first, Rudolf didn't quite understand what crush us meant until he saw Ichabod's fighting style. Ichabod's physique has definitely been strengthened, just like Rudolf's physical strength sharing contract. On both sides of his thick waist, there is a huge square bag. Ichabod took out one grenade after another from the bag and threw it out. The speed of the grenade was so fast that Rudolph could only see a black line. The grenade smashed the glass of the chapel. In just a few seconds, at least 10 grenades were thrown into the church. The church was only about 100 square meters, a very small area, and then there were continuous explosions inside. Shrapnel flew and smashed the glass of the chapel. The fire was shining, and the thick smoke was pushed out of the window by the air wave. The thick smoke in the night was dark and slowly creeping. This small church can be completely covered by the firepower of the irritable brother Ichabod alone, and there is really no need for Rudolph and Kevin to intervene. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 54. The door of the chapel was full of bullet holes, and the broken grenade fragments hit the inner wall of the chapel indiscriminately. Ichabod kicked the door of the chapel open, and the 3 people walked into the church. There was a faint smell of blood in the smell of gunpowder. The flashlight was on, and there were holes left by shrapnel on the tables and chairs, as well as on the walls. Rudolph came to the corner of the wall, and to his surprise, it was not the female druid who fell here, but 2 men. If it was a normal chapel of the goddess of nature, then the female druid should be in charge of this place. Druids can form a contract with wild beasts, so female druids are also veterinarians on the farm. Ichabod tore open the clothes of the 2 men. In addition to the shrapnel wounds, they all had black beetle patterns on their chests. The 6 legs of the beetle stretched out, 2 extended to the shoulders, 2 embraced the back, and the 2 lower limbs went deep into the legs. The beetle's mouthparts were like a necklace, wrapped around the necks of the 2 men. This is definitely not a druid. Druids would not like these black beetles. They continued to search for the Black Queen in the church, but found nothing. Rudolph stood under the statue and found that the statue was carved from wood. At this time, the statue had fallen to one side. A tunnel appeared under the statue. It was unknown where this tunnel led to. The Black Queen had escaped from this tunnel. Rudolph said that the Black Queen was more powerful than the 2 witch hunters imagined. The 2 were still too arrogant. They were not without gain. Some blood was seen at the entrance of the cave. Kevin collected blood and said confidently, "It's a little tricky, but she is really unlucky. She was targeted by my word spirit. She can't escape. No matter where she is, I can predict her location. She escapes and I chase her. After a few rounds, I'm afraid she won't reveal her flaws." Rudolph didn't look at the tunnel. He stared at the statue of the goddess who fell to one side. The goddess of nature in his memory was surrounded by vines and a flying bird on her shoulder. But the goddess statue here only holds wheat ears in her hands. Rudolph thought this was very strange, even stranger than the Black Queen occupying the church. How could the statue change so much? This is a blasphemy to the Druids. After the operation failed, Ichabod and Kevin were ready to rest. Rudolph asked curiously, "Mr. Ichabod, why don't we take advantage of the situation to pursue? We may find the Black Queen along the tunnel." Kevin explained, "I can only divine once a day, so I can only wait until tomorrow night to determine the position of the Black Queen again. If I chase her rashly today, I may encounter danger. There is no need. You are very weak, once a day is not enough. What do you think this is? This is divination. Divination, in the eyes of astrologers, is a theft of fate. It can only be done once every night, and divination for several consecutive days will greatly affect the accuracy of divination." Stealing fate, Rudolph thought this description was very accurate. "Since we can only pursue them tomorrow night, then..." Rudolph looked around the church. "Should we think about how to deal with the angry villagers tomorrow morning? A few inexplicable people rushed in and killed the clergy and pushed down the statues. Wouldn't the villagers beat them to death? That's why I like to bring patrolmen with me." Ichabod patted Rudolph on the shoulder and said, "Patrolman Rudolph, go to the nearest police station as soon as possible and let the police station handle the matter here." The judiciary and the police have always cooperated so closely. Rudolph couldn't help coughing a few times. There was no way. The enemies dealt with by the judiciary were more difficult and caused greater damage. The job of cleaning up the ass fell on the police station. This is the suburb of Fabreau City. The local sheriff was quickly called to the scene by Rudolph. At the same time, there was also an elder of the Druid tribe. The sheriff kept bowing to apologize to the Druid elder. The Druid church was suddenly bombed like this, which was very ugly. Even if there is a problem with the church, we Druids should handle it. Instead of you blowing up our church with explosives. After confirmation, the two dead people on the ground with black beetles painted on their chests and abdomens were the servants of the evil god's nest, the first step to becoming the apostle evil god. If there were no servants in the church, the Druids would definitely appeal to the parliament, and then an apology would not be enough. When the Druid elder calmed down from his anger, Rudolph pointed at the statue and asked, "Elder, is the goddess of nature like this now? When was it changed?" The Druid elder looked at the changed statue with an ugly face. He didn't know when the statue of this small church was replaced. The female Druid who was stationed here before had long disappeared, probably because she was killed. It wasn't originally like this. Although the appearance is similar, a wheat ear alone cannot represent the goddess of nature in its entirety. The Druid elder looked very serious. Like Rudolph, he also thought that this matter was more serious than the Black Queen. The sheriff suggested that they could continue the pursuit, and he had taken people to find another exit of the cave. The result was fruitless, and the local police station failed to find the Black Queen using ordinary investigation methods. Ichabod and Kevin were not in a hurry. As long as they waited until night, they could make another divination. After divination the next day, in the middle of the night, the three rushed into a cave, but this time they came up empty-handed again. The Black Queen escaped again. Rudolph stood at the entrance of the cave and picked up an ordinary beetle from the ground. "Mr. Ichabod, if I'm not mistaken, there will be this kind of beetle around the Black Queen's foothold to convey information to her." Maybe when we approached, the Black Queen already knew it. Ichabod took the beetle from Rudolph and was a little annoyed. To be honest, the priests of the evil god's nest have not appeared in Fabreau City for a long time, and we don't know much about the priests of the nest. The third pursuit was under a big tree. On the trunk of the big tree, there was a huge insect pupa, which was as tall as a person. The pupa was knocked down by Ichabod. Kevin stood in front of the pupa with a frustrated look. "Ichabod, the clue is gone. This should be the priest of the evil god's nest, with a unique ability, the pupa shed its shell. Many insects can metamorphose, just like caterpillars turn into butterflies, and the priest of the nest can also do it. The Black Queen who came out of the pupa is completely different from the previous Black Queen. In other words, except for the soul, the entire body of the Black Queen has changed from the inside out. The Black Queen has been reborn, and her previous blood can no longer lock her position. This is one of the very few methods that can restrain the word spirit certificate divination." Ichabod also shook his head in disappointment. They were careless after all. The Black Queen dared to arrogantly kill a sheriff in Fabreau City. She must have many ways to save her life. The Black Queen can only be temporarily listed as a Class B wanted criminal. Rudolph looked at the one-person high pupa left by the Black Queen, thinking. He turned over a new leaf, regenerated his flesh and blood, built new marrow and bones, and became a new man. The evil god's nest was simply the best apostle to fight against the Inquisition and was full of temptation to Rudolph. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 55. Rudolph finally returned to Lehmantown and finally returned to the police station. In the restaurant of the police station, Rudolph picked up the empty plate and asked the policewoman Kelita opposite. "Kita, I've already finished the dessert bar. Where's the main meal? Why haven't you served it yet?" A thin and somewhat transparent piece of bread, no more than 10 beans, and 3 slices of small, round grilled sausage that were not even half a centimeter thick in total. Rudolph didn't even taste it, these things had already entered his stomach. Kelida widened her eyes. Dinner? This is your main meal? Grain prices have suddenly risen, and it is said that the autumn harvest may be poor. The logistics means to avoid the surge in grain prices first, and wait until the price becomes more reasonable before buying wheat flour. The chef doesn't have wheat flour, so it's good to be able to make so much food. What? Is it so serious? Rudolph was a little unbelievable. He went to the window again and tried to talk before he asked for 2 more pieces of bread. This bread is so thin, is the chef showing us his knife skills? After 2 slices of bread, Rudolph was still very hungry. He turned to look at Ichabod and Kevin. Oh, I'm very sorry, 2 witch hunters, we can't give you anything decent to entertain you. The werewolves have been too rampant recently, and there is a shortage of grain in Lemontown. Ichabod said, I didn't expect that the werewolf riot in Lemontown was so serious that even eating was affected. We will set off today to investigate the werewolf riot. The Black Queen has now completely cut off the clues. Ichabod and Kevin came to Lemontown to investigate the werewolf riots for the Judgment Office. Then I'll trouble you too. I'll let Sam represent the police department to provide convenience for you. Rudolph didn't want to accompany the 2 witch hunters anymore, so after discussing with Sheriff Claude, he asked Sam to accompany the 2 witch hunters throughout the whole process. Sam had already finished his meager breakfast and said very positively, Mr. Ichabod, Mr. Kevin, if you have any needs, you can tell me. Captain Rudolph will help if I can't solve it. If the captain can't solve it, Sheriff Claude will also come forward. After a few people left, Yvonne entered the restaurant. Yvonne sat opposite Rodolfo, eating her little food. Yvonne, from now on, we must avoid the witch hunters, just the 2 tall and thin people just now. Okay. This is the last time I come to have breakfast at this hour. From now on we will all be later. In the morning, Rudolph came to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Claude was very happy when he saw Rudolph. Rudolph, you have been gone for almost 10 days. Isn't Fabreau City very prosperous? Have you lost your mind and don't want to come back? Chief, I think about the police department all the time. Fabreau City is not fun at all. Lemontown is better, it is my forever home. Your forever home is in big trouble now, and there's something you need to investigate. What's up? I think you also saw the breakfast at the police station. Rumors were flying around the town about a grain shortage. There is a big food problem in Lemontown. The mayor has sent people to Fabreau City to adjust the food. Regarding food shortages, we also need to issue an investigation report. Understood. Rudolph took the police order and was ready to see what was going on. After leaving the police station, Yvonne looked at the police ticket. Captain, where do we start the investigation? With the skyrocketing grain prices, of course we need to start investigating from the source and go directly to the largest farmers. Half an hour later, Rudolph and Yvonne arrived at Sir Jennifer's castle. Sir Jennifer, who owns 5 large farms, is the first landowner in Lemontown. Rudolph, have you agreed to be my cavalry captain? Jennifer was a little excited to see Rudolph. Sorry, Sir Jennifer, I am very satisfied with my current job and have no plans to be a cavalry captain for the time being. Jennifer had a look of disappointment on her face. Rudolph saw Jennifer doing night training, practicing the combination of broadsword and shield. Drops of sweat dripped from her chin and fell on her swollen breasts. Sweat soaked her white clothes, changing their color, and clinging to her ravines and peaks. So, Rudolph, what are you doing here? Sir, the price of grain in Lemontown has skyrocketed, almost doubling its original value. Not only has the price increased, but the quantity has also decreased a lot. As the knight with the largest number of farms, I wanted to come and see what was going on. Jennifer handed the broadsword and shield to the cavalry aside. She is still a knight's retinue, not even a knight. The royal family's title succession act ensures that Jennifer can successfully inherit the title and continue to control the huge wealth. However, she is more interested in knights. The food issue has always been handled by others. I know this, but I don't have a good solution for the time being, Jennifer said. Let's go, I'll take you to see the agricultural expert I hired. She is helping me solve the problem. If your police station has any good ideas, please come up with them as soon as possible. While walking, Jennifer asked again without giving up. Rudolph, are you sure you don't want to be my cavalry captain? Sir Jennifer, Sheriff Claude is okay with me. I have no plans to change careers for the time being. A group of them entered a glass greenhouse. At this time, some tomatoes were planted in the greenhouse, and a tall and thin woman in a coat was busy. Jennifer stood in front of the tomato seedlings. Rudolph, it's not that farmers like me are deliberately hoarding grains. It's really that this year's harvest forecast is very poor, and there are insect pests in the farmland, a deadly aphid. Insect pests. Rudolph has been a little sensitive to insects recently, so he was a little wary when he heard about insects. This is my newly hired agronomist and plant expert, Ms. Jessica, who is helping me deal with the aphid pests. Rudolph saw a tall and thin woman wearing a pair of large black-framed glasses. She was wearing a white coat and was doing experiments on aphids in a petri dish. Whether it was on the tomato seedlings or in the petri dish, there were a lot of aphids. Ms. Jessica, this is the patrolman from the police station, Rudolph. Jessica turned around and saw Rudolph, then raised her hand to adjust her black-framed glasses. Patrolman Rudolph, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. Her eyes looked at Rudolph's face curiously through the lenses. After Jennifer introduced the two to each other, she was about to leave. Okay, I should go. Rudolph, I'm going to look for an opportunity to break through the night. You can talk to my housekeeper about anything. Ms. Jessica is mainly responsible for pests. Jennifer left, and Jessica stepped forward a few steps and stretched out her hand. Jessica, agronomy and botany scholar. Rudolph also stretched out his hand. Rudolph, patrolman of Lehman Town. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 56. Under the leadership of botanical expert Jessica, Rudolph came to the Jazz's farm. It is May, the month of Taurus, and in the wheat field, the wheat has grown to knee height. But what is painful is that the wheat leaves are drooping under the burden. Rudolph opened a leaf and found a group of strange black aphids behind the leaf. There are black spots on the stems and leaves of these wheats, which are necrotic spots left after aphids feed on them. Rudolph looked at the wheat fields that were sure to be barren, feeling a little desperate. The wheat field is vast and stretches as far as the eye can see, but the leaves are all drooping on one side, with dots of black spots. Sirs Butler said from the side. Mr. Patrolman, I have already written to Mayor Fakinan and Chief Claude. We are not intentionally driving up grain prices. Of course, we do not rule out other farms doing this, but among our 5 farms, we definitely do not and will never do this. As you can see, this year's grain harvest will definitely be affected and may even fail. In order to cope with this situation, the output of grain from the granary has slowed down, so the price has increased. There is no way around it. Sir Jennifer and Ms. Jessica both mean to deal with the pests first and even prepare to harvest the food next year. Is the situation so serious? Rudolph sighed. The surrounding farms have been unable to maintain normal operations under the threat of werewolf riots. Unexpectedly, the farms around the town have encountered pests again. If this continues, people will starve to death. The housekeeper said doubtfully, it shouldn't be possible for people to starve to death. There should be at least 6 months of food stored in the grain depots throughout the town. I heard a saying. Rudolph said. When there is a shortage of 1/10 of the food, the price does not increase by 1/10, but the price increases until 1/10 of the people cannot afford it, and the price increases until 1/10 of the people cannot afford it, and the price increases until 1/10 of the people starve, or even starve to death. The housekeeper also thinks this matter is serious, but they still have a lot of food in the Jazz Castle, so they are not the most anxious. They still have more than a year's inventory. In the farmland, there are still farmers cleaning bugs from wheat seedling to wheat seedling, but this efficiency is too low. The wheat seedlings cleaned today will be covered with black aphids again tomorrow. The reproductive capacity of aphids is much faster than human cleaning. Seeing Rudolph's eyes on the farmers, the steward explained. Those farmers signed a subcontracting contract with Jazz Castle. They grow food for us. They can get about 40% of the food, and the rest is handed over to Jazz Castle. Rudolph shook his head. What a poor farmer. He turned to Jessica. Ms. Jessica, is there anything you can do now? Jessica pushed up her glasses and said. I'm mixing the pesticide and hope to have results next week. This kind of black aphids are rare. Most aphids are green or yellow. This kind of black aphids have stronger vitality. I cannot guarantee that the insecticide is absolutely effective. Rudolph asked the butler to help him get a bottle, and he took some samples from the back of a leaf. Seeing Rudolph's behavior, Jessica asked in confusion, does Patrolman Rudolph also conduct research on insects? Insects? No research at all, Rudolph said. It just so happens that there is a person in the police station now. With him, it is easy to find where these insects come from. Rudolph didn't want to contact Kevin, but the impact of this incident was too great, so he had to ask Kevin for help. The housekeeper watched Rudolph and Yvonne leave with a sad expression, wondering if the police station could provide any substantial help. Ms. Jessica looked at Rudolph's back with interest. After Rudolph returned to the police station, he first asked Yvonne to leave, and then went to wait for Yanling Kevin alone. Ichabod and Kevin were tracking down the werewolf, and Rudolph waited 2 days for Kevin. Mr. Kevin, would you mind working overtime? Mind. Since you don't mind, then it's hard work. I said I don't mind. You said you don't mind very much. That's really troublesome. Rudolph handed the bottle containing black aphids to Kevin. Don't worry. I've asked the police chief to write out the approval form. There's a workload and it counts as performance. You won't let your work go in vain. Ichabod glanced at the glass bottle, which contained black aphids, and said nothing. It is very common for the witch hunters of the Cooperation Agency to cooperate with the police station in doing some things, especially if they have the signature of the police chief, so he has to work overtime. Mr. Kevin, this kind of black aphid has appeared on the farms around the town of Lehman. If it is not controlled, there will be no harvest this fall. So, I hope Mr. Kevin can use your abilities to find out where this black aphid comes from. Kevin shook the bottle and found that the aphids in the bottle were suffocated to death. He said. Then it's best to find some live insects for divination. Dead ones are not as effective as alive ones. Then let's go to the farm tonight. Late at night, Rudolph and Kevin came to Sir Jennifer's farm. Sir Jennifer's farm is the nearest and largest farm. After asking the butler to make sure there was no one within a few hundred meters, Rudolph found a plate of live bugs for Kevin. Rudolph stayed away, leaving Kevin to divine alone. He looked around, wary of his surroundings. He really wanted to take out the spiritual pet crystal, which would be more efficient. But using a witchcraft in front of Yanling is obviously a very risky behavior. Rudolph was able to sense the changes in star power through the star map, and he realized that Yanling's divination used star power. I wonder if Yan Ling can also sense the changes in the surrounding star power. In the sparse wheat field, Kevin took out the crystal ball, and a blue-white light glowed around him. Soon, the light there dimmed. After the divination, Rudolph walked over to Kevin. At this time, Kevin frowned, as if the result was not good. Rudolph couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" The insect's hive is also the priest of the evil god's insect's hive. Another insect nest? Direction. Where can I find the insect nest priest? That's the problem, Kevin replied. In all directions, everywhere, there are hive priests everywhere. Kevin thought about it and said, Rudolph, Ichabod's official mission is to investigate the origin of those werewolves. The matter of black aphids needs to be handled by your local police station. But you must be careful, there are an abnormal number of these black aphids, and the number of priests in the insect nest is also very large, and the number is abnormal. It feels like a temple in the evil god's insect nest is in action, sending all the low-level priests nearby. Rudolph sighed, what a troublesome thing. He could only console himself with. Kevin, Sheriff Claude said that there is an insect infestation not only in Lehman Town, but also in other towns in Fabreau City. At least Lehman Town is not the most special one, so it shouldn't be that scary. As the two of them were walking outside the farm, they saw a woman walking towards the farmland holding a kerosene lamp. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 57. Patrol Rudolph, I didn't expect you to be here. The night wind blew the skirt of Ms. Jessica's white coat. Ms. Jessica's figure was so slender. Oh, let me see how these aphids look like at night. Have your pesticides paid off? Mr. Patrolman, you are too impatient. We only parted in the afternoon. How can we produce results in such a short time? Sorry, it's my problem. I'm really at my wit's end and don't know what to do. At this time, Kevin raised his hand to adjust his collar. Rudolph, won't you introduce me to this intellectual and elegant lady? Rudolph thinks that chasing the werewolf to investigate the case recently has left Kevin feeling a little empty. Ms. Jessica, the agronomy and botany expert hired by Sir Jennifer, is here to deal with the black aphids. Kevin, patrol officer from Fabreau City. Rudolph didn't know how to explain Kevin's identity, so he made up a patrolman. Although neither Ichabod nor Kevin told Rudolph to keep it secret, Rudolph still subconsciously covered it up. After all, he was a witch hunter, so it was best not to make it known to everyone. Kevin was in great condition, relieved of his fatigue, chatting with Jessica, while Rudolph waited boredly. Patrol Kevin, I want to observe the habits of black aphids at night, so I won't talk to you anymore. Come to my laboratory another day and I can treat you to tea. I have cultivated some very good tea leaves. A woman who works hard always exudes a different kind of charm. Go and do your work, Ms. Jessica. Rudolph finally waited until Kevin finished exuding his self-righteous masculine charm, and they walked towards the police station together. Kevin, the black aphids you just mentioned come from all directions. How far away are they? Why do I always see Ms. Jessica's delicate and elegant face? Kevin, do you think this aphid can be cured? Also, what do you mean by temple? A white face, thin eyebrows, thin lips, and of course, black-rimmed glasses. Kevin, give me some direction and I'll go take a look tomorrow. Ms. Jessica is my ideal type. I just want to find such an intellectual lady who is full of unique charm. Rudolph was speechless. How about we talk about something else? Kevin's eyes were full of memories. Divination is a very complex subject, and it is very difficult to learn the positions of the sun, moon, planets, meteors, constellations are unpredictable, and the various combinations make it difficult to master. Ms. Jessica reminds me of my senior sister. My senior sister is so intellectual and gentle, and she slowly guided me to learn divination and astrology. Senior sister also has a fair face, thin lips, and big black-rimmed glasses. Pity. However, I met Ms. Jessica, and I thought she was so intellectual and charming. After a while, Kevin continued, "Why don't you speak, Rudolph? Congratulations, did you come to Lehman Town at the right time? You also met someone who makes your heart beat." "That's true. Werewolves are so difficult to deal with. It would be perfect if we could still drink the tea made by Ms. Jessica when we return to Lehman Town. So, can we get down to business?" Okay, of course. What are we going to say? By the way, I'll give you a direction and a rough distance. That place is one of the sources of black aphids. What I want to emphasize is that this black aphid is very strange. It does not come from one place, but from all directions. The temple just mentioned is an organization of evil gods. The evil god priests are the most organized heretic apostles. They always carry out activities in temples of different levels. I divined many level 1 evil god high priests, and they were just outside the farm, in the wilderness. You can check out one of these places first, but be careful. Rudolph nodded. The effect of the spirit was really great. It completely saved Rudolph from collecting information and reasoning, and directly gave Rudolph the answer. The next day, when Rudolph and Ivan were preparing to go out, they found that only Ichabod was having breakfast in the dining room. "Mr. Ichabod, where's Kevin?" "Kevin, he went to find his senior sister." Ichabod was very confused. I remember that his senior sister had already married to Warang City in the south. Why did his senior sister also come to Lemang Town? Unexpectedly, Kevin went to Jazz Castle early in the morning, which was really positive. As far as Rudolph knew, there was no investigation into the werewolves. Ichabod captured several werewolves without asking why werewolves suddenly appeared around Fabro City. Not only were there a large number of werewolves in Lehman Town, but also in other directions of Fabro City. The werewolf matter now belongs to the Inquisition. Let Ichabod have a headache. Rudolph is going to see the aphids first. Rudolph and Ivan rode towards the place pointed out by Kevin. The closer we get to where Kevin pointed out, the more bugs we see. Rudolph turned his head and flicked the 2 bugs off his shoulders. These bugs were so annoying that they crawled on Rudolph's shoes, trouser legs, clothes, and even in his hair. Ivan next to her was no better. From time to time, insects flew up from Rudolph's body and flew into the distance. Rudolph opened his pocket watch and followed the flying insects with a sparrow. Soon, the flying insects reached their destination. There was no vegetation on an uninhabited hillside. From a distance, the ground looked like a spider web. Looking closer, it was indeed a dense mass of black aphids. The thick spider silk was made up of black aphids. These aphids were crawling on the ground. From time to time, aphids flew into the spider web, and aphids flew out of the spider web. This spider web had an exaggerated diameter of hundreds of meters. In the center of the spider web was a black sphere full of aphids. Rudolph caught many sparrows and asked them to explore the situation around. The result was very bad. Aphids within a radius of several kilometers were communicating with this spider web-like insect nest. The aphids here flew away, and aphids from other places flew over. Ordinary aphids can reproduce 30 generations a year. Even if these black aphids only retain the reproductive capacity of ordinary aphids, it is still exaggerated enough. This aphid spider web is the nest of aphids, where aphids breed. Kevin said there are many such places, which means there are many such nests producing aphids. To celebrate the collection reaching 3,000, add one more chapter. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 58. Just as Rudolph was observing the insect nest in the distance, he suddenly felt uncomfortable in his nose. His nose was itchy, so he wiped his nose and a few aphids came out of his nose. Unconsciously, more and more aphids crawled around him and Ivan. Each aphid was very small, only a few millimeters, but there were surprisingly many of them. These aphids drilled into holes, and Rudolph pinched his ears again and crushed some more aphids to death. Because they were around the ears, the sound of the aphids being crushed was still very crisp. "I've been discovered." Rudolph jumped up from the ground and began to slap the aphids on his body. Rudolph felt that his neck was very itchy, and these aphids were also drilling into his clothes. "Itchy," Ivan also shouted. Rudolph stretched out his hand and pressed on the back of Ivan's neck. "Don't move, I'll help you." Aphids survive by sucking the sap of plants. These mutated black aphids are obviously more aggressive. Ivan feels itchy, which is actually the aphids biting her skin. When Rudolph touched Ivan, the numbness and itchiness on Ivan's body suddenly disappeared. Rudolph played the role of the witchword venom and gave these little things a little bit of toxin. "Go back to the horse first." Rudolph and Ivan first found their horses and found that the horses were also constantly digging the ground. Rudolph also removed the aphids from the horse's body, and then rode away. It is not easy to move during the day, and both Rudolph and Ivan are more suitable for night. Rudolph went to the nearest farm and bought all their kerosene. It was not until the evening that Rudolph came to the insect nest again. What surprised Rudolph was that the insect nest was actually moving. Those black aphids were slowly moving to a more remote place. It seemed that the insect nest had also anticipated the danger. However, its movement speed was very, very slow, only a few hundred meters more than when it was discovered during the day. The black ball composed entirely of aphids was still slowly rolling forward. "Ivan, we need to cooperate." Rudolph's horse was afraid of the insect nest and did not dare to approach it, so Rudolph could only make Ivan work hard. "How to cooperate?" Rudolph was a little embarrassed. "Just ride you." "Okay." Hearing such a straightforward answer, Rudolph felt that he had driven into a tree and failed. "I don't know when Ivan will get it, anyway, she still looks like she knows nothing." Ivan skillfully took off the jacket and pants of the police uniform and put them on the horse's back. Riding on the white wolf transformed by Ivan, Rudolph had a waist-thick kerosene can in each hand. The white wolf moved swiftly and rushed directly to the center of the insect nest, rushing towards the black ball formed by the black aphids. The few aphids encountered on the road were poisoned to death by Rudolph's venom. The aphids were obviously aware of the danger. They suddenly flew up from the ground and condensed a dark tentacle. The diameter of this aphid tentacle was 1 meter, and it rushed straight to Rudolph. Rudolph suddenly took a deep breath and spit forward suddenly. With his lung capacity, it was impossible to spit out something like an air cannon. However, the strange thing was that when Rudolph blew out a breath, the aphids in front of him died and fell to the ground. This method of poisoning is very low in toxicity. There were only dozens of aphids poisoned by Rudolph's breath. However, the toxin was transmitted. The aphid tentacles were like necrosis, starting from the aphids that the breath touched, and began to disintegrate inch by inch. Level 1 Witchcraft, Infection. Use Scorpio Witch language venom to make toxins, and then use Scorpio Witch language infection to spread the toxins. These densely packed aphids can transmit toxins by colliding with each other. The insect nest reacted quickly, and the aphid tentacle quickly broke from the middle, which ensured that at least half of the aphids were not poisoned. Aphids are a doomsday disaster for wheat fields, but aphids are too small after all. For Rudolph, the damage caused by these aphids is very limited. White wolf. Break. At this time, the white wolf had rushed to a position less than 30 meters away from the aphid black ball. The white wolf suddenly braked, and using inertia, Rudolph took the opportunity to throw out 2 kerosene cans. After throwing out the kerosene cans, Rudolph quickly drew his gun and blew up the kerosene cans in the air with 2 shots. The black kerosene spread and poured on the aphid black ball. Rudolph then took out a lighter, rubbed the flint, and the kerosene lighter ignited a flame. The lighter was also thrown into the air, lighting the kerosene. The kerosene splashed on the aphid black ball, and a huge fire ignited in an instant. For a moment, the whole night suddenly lit up. The pungent smell of fuel mixed with the stench of burning protein. Aphids can't scream, but Rudolph can feel the pain of aphids. Like a cloud of fire, the aphids flying around expanded with flames. Just as Rudolph was waiting for the fire to slowly burn, the aphid black ball covered with a cloud of fire suddenly exploded. Kerosene can't explode, it can only be the black ball's own choice. The aphids that make up the black ball suddenly scattered, sparking a large cloud of fire. Those aphids seemed to have turned into fireflies, and after a brief burning, they disappeared into the night. Rudolph raised his gun, and a man stood up from the black ball. This man, like the one Rudolph had seen in the chapel, had a black beetle pattern on his chest. The 6 legs of the beetle stretched to his shoulders, back and legs. Rudolph felt numb all over, and he was physically very uncomfortable. Because the man's arm was covered with dense, finger-thick holes. The black holes in the skin and flesh aroused Rudolph's intensive phobia. And black aphids were going in and out of those holes. This man actually transformed his arm into an aphid nest. Rudolph fired without hesitation and shot the man. The alchemical bullet hit the man's head, making a hole in his head. Rudolph, who had originally breathed a sigh of relief and had put down his gun, raised his arm again. Because he saw that the man was not dead. Even though the alchemical bullet pierced his head, the wound on his head glowed red like a red-hot iron block, but he was indeed not dead, and was even moving towards Rudolph. Endless aphids gathered in the air and pounced into the bullet hole on the man's head. The aphids pounced on the burning part left by the alchemical bullet, making the burning light weaker and weaker. The head is not his weakness. The alchemical bullet blew up the werewolf's head and killed the werewolf, but the head of this priest of the evil god's hive was not his fatal organ. Rudolph remembered some insects that could still move even if their heads were lost. Perhaps the priest of the evil god's hive also had this ability. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 59. Unexpectedly, the priest of the evil god's hive also has amazing recovery ability. Those aphids drilled into the wound, then melted and turned into nutrients. The shell of the aphids allowed the bones to grow, and the juice of the aphids allowed the muscles to heal. Although this healing ability is not as fast as that of the werewolf, it is also surprising enough. The burning power of the alchemical bullet can cause burns to the high priest, but it cannot kill the aphids that rush to the wound without hesitation. At this time, the high priest raised his hand, and he suddenly waved his hand quickly, clapping his hands continuously, making a very strange sound, like insects rubbing against each other. Rudolph knew that he could not kill the high priest in a short time. He raised his hand and fired a few more bullets at the high priest, then turned around and shouted, "Run! White Wolf!" The wolf girl carried Rudolph and turned around to run away. Rudolph looked down at his pocket watch, and the pet crystal had already shown that there were groups of black cloud-like things floating around. That was not a black cloud, but aphids from the surrounding farms, gathering towards the evil god priest. This insect nest priest is really depressing. He can't be killed even with a headshot. As long as he has aphids, he can continue to repair the wounds on his body. Rudolph suddenly remembered the Black Queen, the ability of the Black Queen to escape Kevin's divination, the ability called Metamorphosis Pupa. Did she completely replace her body tissue with beetles? Just as he saw now, the insects had turned into brand new bones and muscles for the insect nest priest. After no longer staying in the black ball of aphids, the insect nest priest did not move his legs, and the aphids under his feet lifted him up and began to chase Rudolph and Yvonne. Rudolph kept adjusting his direction, and he used an owl to look for no man's land. If someone saw Rudolph and the white wolf moving together, it would be hard to explain. The white wolf had the speed advantage, and the insect nest priest could only follow far behind. The white wolf still ran away according to Rudolph's instructions without saying a word. In fact, she thought she could turn around and fight with the high priest, and she would not be bitten to death by those aphids in a short time, but as a girl, she hated those little bugs, and she did not want to fight with the flying bugs. Rudolph was on the back of the white wolf, sensing the star power. Pisces witch language, entanglement. Time passed by minute, and the speed of the high priest was getting slower and slower. He looked down at his abdomen. The patrolman had just shot him in the abdomen, and he did not care at first. This shot was not even an alchemical bullet, but just an ordinary shot. However, now the muzzle of the gun was festering. The manifestation of the festering was that the aphids that were supposed to repair the wound were constantly dying. Rudolph looked back with satisfaction. Level 1 bone-eroding poison, this was Rudolph's newly developed witchcraft. The bullet that hit the high priest was a bullet with poisoning. When the enemy is poisoned, the Pisces witchcraft entanglement can be used to continuously send toxins into the enemy's body from a long distance. This technique is the bone-eroding poison technique. Pisces, in the sky, is two fish with their tails connected. Even if the fish swim in different directions, they will be firmly connected. Pisces witchcraft entanglement, Rudolph used it in the pet crystal. This is a very practical witchcraft that can make Rudolph and the poisoned person entangled, that is, to achieve long-distance casting. Unless the poison is detoxified in a short time, once poisoned, you can only wait for Rudolph's star power to be exhausted. If Rudolph still has star power, once poisoned, he will be poisoned forever. And the poison created by the Scorpio witchcraft venom, to be honest, Rudolph doesn't know what kind of poison it is, and he doesn't know how to detoxify it. The insect nest priest is getting weaker and weaker, and the wound on his abdomen is expanding. Countless aphids no longer chase Rudolph and the white wolf, but pounce on the insect nest priest. Those black aphids continued to rush to the wound. Half of the black aphid ball even formed on one side of the high priest, leaving only half of the high priest exposed. Rudolph was sweating slightly. There were too many damn aphids, which consumed too much star power. He took out the shotgun, which had more bullets and higher damage after being poisoned. He shot all the poisoned shotgun shells he had accumulated at the high priest, reloading and shooting continuously. Rudolph fired at least 12 poisoned shotgun shells. Rudolph suddenly noticed that aphids were no longer flying out of the high priest's arm. His arm was not originally a black hole, but it looked very black because the hole was full of aphids before. When the aphids disappeared, there were flesh-colored, finger-thick holes, densely packed, one next to the other, with only a thin layer of cortex between every two holes. After the poisoned shotgun shells were used up, Rudolph took out the alchemical bullets. Rudolph hated the holes on his arm that made his hair stand on end. One magazine, 6 alchemical bullets, shot directly at the arm of the high priest. The high priest finally let out a painful howl. Are those honeycomb-like insect nests the weakness of the high priest? The high priest bent down in pain, and the aphids around him lost control, and the black balls of aphids flew away. Rudolph changed the magazine without hesitation and shot 6 alchemical bullets into the other arm of the high priest. Soon, the flying aphids fell to the ground one after another, and the corpses of the aphids piled up like a hill. Rudolph breathed a sigh of relief, and finally killed the priest. Not only were the insects around the priest dying, but the aphids in the distance were also dying. Rudolph returned to his horse first, and a lot of aphid corpses fell on the horse. He took a lasso from the horse and returned to the place where the priest of the insect nest died. He didn't want to pull the priest of the insect nest out with more than 10 centimeters of aphid corpses. The lasso was spinning in the air and was thrown out by Rudolph. Because they were all aphids, the priest of the insect nest did not fall down, but grew in the aphid pile like a tree. The rope loop was wrapped around the priest's head, pulling the priest of the insect nest out of the aphid corpse pile and pulling it to Rudolph's feet. Soon, he saw the slightly glowing honeycomb-like tissue on the arm of the insect nest. The hexagonal honeycomb has a total of 6 holes. This is the relic of the priest of the insect nest. At this time, Yvonne also changed her clothes. "Captain, what are you looking at?" "The relic, the one that glows." "Glowing? Where is it glowing?" At this time, Rudolph realized one thing. Perhaps only wizards can see the light of the relic. After all, only wizards can use relics to make magic tools. "I can't see it, so forget it." Rudolph took out a dagger and pried the relic off the arm of the high priest. The relic of the high priest disappeared in Rudolph's hands. The level 1 hive flew to the starry sky in Rudolph's mind like a meteor. Scorpius 5/14, Scorpius Eta, the 5th star from the tail of Scorpius, was lit up by the level 1 hive. At this time, the tail of Scorpius has been completed for more than half, with only the last 1 or 2 stars left, and the curved tail can be completely lit. From Scorpius, 3 suspended stars fell, which was the reward Rudolph received. Level 1 Endless Bullet Nest, Level 1 Aphid Breeding Potion, Level 1 Aphid Communication Potion. Ignore the last 2, the reward in the first star instantly aroused Rudolph's interest. Level 1 Magic Weapon, the method of making the Endless Shell. Endless Shell, sounds very powerful. This magic weapon also requires the Cancer Witch language, and Rudolph has also found the Cancer Witch language, but unfortunately he has to wait for a while. It is May, the Taurus month, and there is still a month and a half before the Cancer month July. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 60. What makes Rudolph regretful is that the endless bullet nest of the witch weapon requires the use of the witch language of Cancer, which is the witch language of the last water sign. He can only wait for the Cancer month and the sun to move into the Cancer star field before he can learn the Cancer witch language. Rudolph threw the body of the insect nest priest into the pile of aphid corpses. After pouring fire oil on it, the fluffy aphid carcass has enough air in the middle, plus enough protein and oil, to burn a very strong flame. After taking care of things here, Rudolph is going to investigate the results in the surrounding farms to see if the aphids in the farmland will be better after the death of the insect high priest. When the farmer accompanied Rudolph to observe those fields the next day, he found that many aphids in the fields died overnight. There are also some aphids with very strong vitality. They are still alive after the priest dies, but their numbers are not many anymore. Farmers can deal with them with pesticides. The farmer's expression was one of surprise and dancing at first. After a while, his facial features gradually solidified and took on a look of pain. "Patrol Rudolph, why didn't you come earlier?" Even if the aphids were now gone, his fields would be barren. Farmland is so fragile. An untimely heavy rain may destroy farmers' work for a year. Rudolph tried to give some other suggestions. "It's only May, can't we rush to plant some other crops?" The farmers gathered around and began to discuss how to make up for the losses as much as possible. Rudolph also took out the confirmation form and asked the farmer to sign the document. On the confirmation sheet, Rudolph set fire to an insect nest, and the number of aphids within a few kilometers of the surrounding area was greatly reduced. After returning to the police station, Rudolph handed the confirmation slip to Chief Claude. "Chief, I have found the cause of the insect plague. And I have eliminated an aphid nest." Sheriff Claude was stunned. He really didn't expect that the matter would come to a conclusion so quickly. He took the police confirmation form, which briefly described the process and included the farmer's confirmation of the results. In other words, the insect plague is not a great migration of insects caused by the climate, but is caused intentionally by the evil god's insect nest. This is the first time I have come into contact with this kind of heretical apostle. Yes. I fired all the bullets and used up all the kerosene before burning the insect nest to death. Sheriff, You need to replenish me with more alchemical bullets and reimburse me for buying kerosene. That's easy to say. Chief Claude nodded with satisfaction. His patrol captain was really capable. The Lemon Town Police Department was the first to find the cause of the insect infestation, and he had to make a report to the Superior Police Department. Sheriff Claude suddenly thought of the witch hunter Kevin. It would be best to include the speaking spirit in the report. It was the speaking spirit that accurately divined the source of the aphids. Also, Sheriff, I'm a little short of money recently, could you give me some bonus? That's easy to say. Since you found the source of the insect plague very quickly, let's apply for some bonuses for you. After Sheriff Claude finished speaking, he rummaged through the drawer for the bonus approval form. Just then, the sheriff's door opened. Rudolph turned around and saw that it was the farmer he had just met yesterday. The farmer said hurriedly, "Mr. Sheriff, Patrolman Rudolph, the aphid disappeared for a day and then came again." Rudolph saw in despair that Sheriff Claude stuffed the bonus approval form back into the drawer, and then looked at Rudolph like this. Rudolph wiped his face and asked, "What do you mean?" Sheriff Claude said, "Destroy the insect nest at least 3 times, eliminate accidental factors, and prove that the insect plague is caused by the evil god insect nest. I will give you another bonus." Rudolph shook his head helplessly, put his arm around the farmer's shoulders and left the sheriff's office. "Boss, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I can only say that there are more evil insect nests than imagined." Just after Rudolph left, policewoman Kelida walked in. Sheriff Claude looked at Kelida in confusion, meaning what are you doing here? "Sheriff, Rudolph just boasted that he could get the bonus. I'm here to get the bonus approval form so I can give him the bonus." Rudolph didn't get the bonus yet, but he blew it out. "Haha, there is no bonus, he messed up, and it's not right. It can only be said that he didn't completely get it. Let me just say, Captain Rudolph is so awesome, he is simply a legend among patrolmen. Even Old Baby said that the police department has not seen such a patrol captain for a long time. An ordinary person can capture level 1 werewolves every month. He was previously called the Little Prince of Werewolves. It would be fine to say that he has rich experience, but now, he can even deal with the evil god priests, which is really an exaggeration. Fortunately he didn't succeed, otherwise we would all feel that our guns were not the same model. By the way, Sheriff, did you give Rudolph a special revolver? Why is he so powerful?" Sheriff Claude shook his head, "Of course not. How can I get special treatment on such a key weapon to save lives and kill enemies? Even if there are very powerful guns, I will allocate one to each of you." "Chief, is Rudolph your illegitimate son?" Sheriff Claude was stunned. How could there be such a rumor? How could Rudolph be my illegitimate child? No, how could I have an illegitimate child? This is slander, absolutely slander. Kelida obviously didn't believe it. She thought that with the style of the sheriff, how could he not have an illegitimate child? After Kelida left, Sheriff Claude was thinking about something. The sacrifices in recent months were all level 1 werewolves captured by Rudolph. If Rudolph had found the trick to capture level 1 werewolves, then the priest of the evil god's nest this time could not be explained by experience. Sheriff Claude thought of a possibility. He took out a bottle of good wine from the cabinet and went out. In the cemetery of Lehman Town, the gravekeeper Old Gray was basking in the sun on a lounge chair. The footsteps made Old Gray open his eyes slightly. He turned around and saw that it was Claude, so he closed his eyes again. Claude put the bottle of wine in Old Gray's arms. "Old Gray, I have something to ask you to answer." Hearing the crisp sound of liquid hitting the glass bottle, Old Gray smiled a little. "Go ahead, little Claude." Claude hasn't heard this name for a long time. Old Gray has been the gravekeeper since Claude was born. When he was a child, he would come to the cemetery in the middle of the night to stir up ghosts and scare Old Gray, but Old Gray scared him so much that he peed his pants instead. Old Gray, you know Rudolph, right? He always comes to the cemetery to bury the sacrifices. That kid, I know him. He never comes empty-handed every time he comes to the cemetery. He's a good kid. I thought you taught him that. He's very sensible. Old Gray, Rudolph is a little too lucky. He and Ivan can kill a level 1 werewolf alone, and now they can kill the priest of the evil god's nest. This is a little abnormal. Why, the patrolmen die too slowly, you feel uncomfortable. What do you mean? I was the first to rush in every action before. It's just that Rudolph is too capable, which makes me seem less active recently. There's nothing we can do about the high mortality rate of patrolmen. The mortality rate of patrolmen in Lehmantown is the lowest in the vicinity. I've tried my best. Then what do you want to say? Sheriff Claude asked very seriously. Old Gray, among you guys, did anyone take a fancy to Rudolph? Did you give him some help? Old Gray narrowed his eyes and thought about how to answer. Little Claude, your teacher, and I have an agreement. The town of Lehman will send all the sacrifices to me as my collection. I will be responsible for handling the follow-up to prevent those sacrifices from having any tails. You can't handle all the corpses. In the cemetery, I have the final say, and outside the cemetery, I don't care. Even if I do something to Rudolph in the cemetery, you shouldn't ask. I know, Claude hurriedly said, this agreement is good for both you and me. I mean, Rudolph's matter. I originally wanted him to become an alchemist, but now something unexpected must have happened, and I want to get the correct situation. Then why don't you ask Rudolph? Sheriff Claude said, if it's your arrangement, I believe that Rudolph himself doesn't know that he has been arranged. He is just a teenager. Old Gray remembered that night, he was originally going to receive a new collection, the level 3 wizard, Bloody Saren. The level 3 zombie tooth was temporarily lent to Bloody Saren by him, just to prevent Saren from being killed directly by the Judgment Bureau. However, before he could find a suitable new body for the charred Saren, Bloody Saren was killed by Rudolph. He didn't get the wizard Saren, and the zombie tooth was lost. Old Gray couldn't bring himself to attack Rudolph directly. He hadn't seen such a bold young man for a long time. He hesitated for a while and observed Rudolph for a while. He thought this young man was very interesting. But he didn't like him yet, mainly because Rudolph was not suitable to be a zombie. The person he liked was still in the wild, eating dirt and training. Cooper and Rudolph had a good relationship. They established a good friendship and trust. Sometimes, he was too lazy to go, or it was inconvenient to go to the wilderness, so he could let Rudolph help Cooper. As for the level 3 zombie tooth, let Rudolph use it for a while. More importantly, Old Gray didn't want Rudolph to really take the path of an alchemist. He felt that everyone was a heretic apostle, and Rudolph was fine now. Old Gray unscrewed the whiskey and took a big sip directly from the bottle. We are all from Lehmantown. Lehmantown is so small and has so many people. It is not easy to find a good young man. I can only tell you that it was not me who chose Rudolph. Sheriff Claude automatically completed the sentence, saying that someone else chose Rudolph. I understand. I will also pay attention to Rudolph in the future. As you said, there are so many people in Lehmantown. It is not easy for a good young man to appear. On the way back, Sheriff Claude sighed that Rudolph was lucky. When he was young, he was so outstanding that he was not chosen by those people, which resulted in him being a level 2 alchemist now. Maybe it was because those people, including Old Gray in front of him, were very resistant to knights and alchemists. Especially knights. In Lehmantown, there has never been a level 3 knight, only a level 3 knight zombie. Claude suddenly stopped on the road. If he was promoted to a level 3 alchemist, wouldn't he also be disliked by those people? Would he be beaten to death? After thinking it over, Claude decided to secretly prepare for his promotion ceremony. A level 1 alchemist needs to master the alchemy skills of metallic lead and can make alchemical lead bullets, usually shotguns. Level 2 alchemists need to master the alchemy skills of metallic copper and can make alchemical bullets. Level 3 alchemists need to master the alchemy skills of metallic iron. When he becomes a level 3 alchemist, he will be able to have more flexible weapons, and iron weapons can be used in a much wider range than bronze weapons. In addition to weapons, iron tools can also be used on large machinery, making the alchemist's abilities more practical. As for Rudolph, if someone is in charge now, then he won't have to do much and let him be. Rudolph didn't know yet that there was a discussion about him in the cemetery. In the following days, he kept searching for the high priest in the wilderness. Even without Kevin's divination, Rudolph gained some experience. As long as he followed the flight path of aphids around the farm, he could quickly find the insect nest priest. Rudolph stood guard around the farm owner. After cleaning up 3 insect nest priests in a row, there were no black aphids in the farm for a long time. And he also harvested many relics of the insect high priests. When Rudolph left the farm, 2 people who should not be here were riding horses in the wilderness outside the farm, looking for something. Kevin, and Ms. Jessica. Ms. Jessica said apologetically. Mr. Kevin, I'm sorry to trouble you. I heard that there are a lot less black aphids here, so I came here to investigate. Not only for the grain in Lehman Town, but just for the beautiful Ms. Jessica, I am extremely eager to make this trip. Kevin's horse was 1 step behind Jessica. He looked at Ms. Jessica's delicate profile and felt that the time now was very wonderful. The wind in May is no longer cold, but it doesn't seem hot either. The right wind blew Jessica's black hair. A few strands of hair fluttered slightly in the wind, occasionally revealing Ms. Jessica's white neck. The white jade-like skin reflected light in the sun. As for the aphid plague, it has nothing to do with Kevin now. It's just that Ms. Jessica was worried about the insect plague, otherwise Kevin would prefer to stay in the laboratory with Jessica. Even if he was mixing pesticides, it would be more comfortable than going out. Kevin's ability is also very useful when formulating pesticides. It took him 3 nights to directly divine the proportions of the pesticide formula, which won praise from Ms. Jessica. At this time, Jessica had already arrived in front of the insect high priest who was burned to death. The high priest who was burned into a charred corpse would not be plagued, so Rudolph did not bury him. At this time, Kevin wanted to attract Jessica's attention again. Beautiful lady, I know this place. I once performed a divination for Patrolman Rudolph of the police station and helped him find one of the sources of black aphids. I heard that he helped a farm solve the problem of insect infestation. I also heard that he would be awarded the Outstanding Patrolman of the Year this year. My divination played a small role here. Jessica smiled like a flower and looked at Kevin tenderly. You are really unexpectedly outstanding, Mr. Kevin. Kevin stepped forward. I'm a professional, whatever you need me to do, I'll help you. This corpse is so dirty, don't pollute your delicate palms and white backs. Standing next to Jessica, Kevin looked at Jessica's collar, where he could see the whiteness leading into the darkness. He was so attached to it, it made him intoxicated by the hazy white light. This is his white moonlight. Excuse me, Mr. Kevin. I want to see who can create so many aphids. Kevin had a certain understanding of the high priest. He pointed at the priest's arm with his staff. Look, fair lady, this is the organ that produces the worm. Generally, insect nest priests will implant this modified insect nest in certain parts of the body. Look at this, it can even be made into a witchcraft weapon by a wizard. Kevin was stunned. He had dealt with wizards and knew that wizards would collect relics of apostles, which were only useful to wizards. At this time, the relics of the insect nest priest have been taken away and disappeared. What's wrong, Mr. Kevin, is there something wrong? Kevin's keen intuition told him that a wizard had appeared in Lehman Town. At this moment, Kevin thought a lot. He told Patrolman Rudolph about this location through divination. It's okay. Kevin pointed to other burnt pits on his arm. Look at these places, they are all organs that produce aphids. 2 in -1.